Welcome everyone to Kiss Meets the Podcast 4K. I am one of your hosts, Eli Clausen.
And I feel like I've had a pimple coming on my nose or something. It really hurts.
Right there.
Yeah.
Oh man, so this is the first episode in the, I guess, second leg of the countdown series, if you want to call it that. We're still trying to come up with a name to call this. I think we sort of want to get away from the 4K thing, since that was kind of more for the Kiss discography. We also want to, instead of just calling it like extras or something like that, or, we're trying to think of something to call this. So if you guys have any ideas, please leave a comment, let us know, because right now we're stumped. So may just kind of make this, this may look kind of bare bones, at least till we come up with something. So I want to create a whole new intro for the show. As you may end up have seen at the beginning of this, there may not have been an intro, not sure yet, but definitely didn't want to use the old one that we used for the regular 4K. So so just kind of brainstorming, trying to come up with a good little title, and then go from there and let it all kind of come together again, just like the first part with 4K did. So we are going in chronological order. So starting with this episode again, as we had mentioned, is the album Chelsea, which was a band that Peter Criss was in prior to Kiss, and very, very different stuff, that's for sure. Another thing we want to kind of mention, we're going to do things a little different this time. I think instead of doing the, ranking them from least favorite to favorite, this time we're just going to go in order of the tracks and then basically just discuss track by track. Sorry we didn't put that out there earlier, because some of you guys had already done the ranking process. We do appreciate that. We'll still take that into, matters, and, factor that in, and mention those as well. But I think from now on, I don't know, what do you think? Should they still rank them if they feel, or should they just sort of maybe give us thoughts on the album in general?
Yeah, no, I'd still go ahead and rank them. That's what I've been doing.
Okay. Yeah, so that's kind of the new layout of the show. We may still kind of, change things up a bit as we go along. Because some of these albums, to be honest, are, and with this one starting off, are just kind of hard to just sit and try to think of least favorite to favorite, or to, try to come up with a lot of notes to say about every song. So we figured it'd be a little easier to just go track by track, so we could both speak on them at the same time. And now, of course, some of these will be easier, like the Wicked Lester one, Fraley's comment, those sort of the more anchor type albums when it comes to some of these artists. But it's definitely going to be fun and interesting. We hope you guys are going to stick along and keep on, supporting and contributing, and giving us all that feedback. And again, just like what we did with the Kiss thing, there may have been some casual Kiss fans or people that wasn't maybe quite into Kiss. Maybe it gave you a little inspiration to want to listen to more Kiss, or maybe you've got into more stuff that you wasn't into before. So definitely with this, there's a lot of stuff that people may not be familiar of, especially if you're a casual fan of Kiss or not so casual fan. So you may be surprised some of the stuff that's going to pop up on this this part of the series. And there is so much stuff that we're going to cover. We've already figured out that this may be a couple year process. For all the stuff we're going to cover on this thing. So this is definitely going to be a long journey, and it's going to be fun. Can't wait to get into it. And for that matter, I'm not sure if there are any other Chelsea album reviews on the internet or even YouTube at all. So I don't know. I could be wrong, but we could be the first ones to have a Chelsea album type of review on YouTube right now. So interesting to see. So I'm going to stop blabbing here. I think we had just a couple comments that popped up here and there on a couple of the recent episodes. So we'll get into those and then get going.
Indeed, yes. So this may also I might poke back through occasionally, but this may be the last time I check some of the 4K episodes for new comments. So be sure to leave any comments on the most recent episode. Gonna see what we can do. We're gonna get up into the hundreds of episodes that I gotta check every time here pretty soon. So we'll figure out some better way to do that. All right. So back on the Monster episode, we had Steve McGowan actually comment, "What about Don't Touch My Ascot? Wouldn't that be the last Kiss song?"
Hey, that'd be a heck of a way to say goodbye to the fans if that is the last. I'd be fine with it.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I think we're going to try and figure some way to put that one and Samurai Sun into this extra stuff. But, I mean, I don't know if we want to dedicate a whole episode to just those two. Somehow we'll fit those in there.
Yeah, we may kind of do something where we kind of combine all the, because they did the track on the Ramones tribute, the Paul McCartney tribute, things like that. So we may just sort of do one where we kind of talk about all those kind of random tracks that weren't, on one sole album.
Definitely, yeah. We also got a couple of comments from Robbie here. He did give us his rankings for the Monster album, which we did put in there. Thank you for breaking the tie, finally.
Yes.
That we had in that, yes. So he does say his number one, by the way, was Hell or Hallelujah there. No big surprise. I think that was what won that album. He does also note, Paul's songs are my favorite since Psycho Circus and Creatures albums.
Wow.
Yeah. He also says, to me, Monster has aged well, and I listen to this a lot. There really is a lot of killer songs on this album. I can't name a bad track off Monster, and it's definitely one of my favorite Kiss albums. The production isn't the best, but the heaviness and catchy songs make up for it, and I enjoy Tommy's playing on everything. I feel Last Chance is a great song, but they should have ended the song in comparison to Black Diamond from Alive 1, because the ending is singer kind of fading out instead of, kicking the ending. That's my only gripe. The Devil Is Me, Freak, All for the Love of Rock and Roll, Long Way Down, Hell or Hallelujah are my favorites, and I can't forget Tommy's song is just a killer track. It seems Eli has changed his tune about this album and gave a more positive review with Sonic Boom because he bashed almost every song, lol. I feel it's a pretty good album and I like it a lot. I love the way Hell or Hallelujah starts off the album with that classic throwback feel, and I feel the album stays pretty strong in my opinion. I have to give this a 9. It's that good. I'm surprised how critical you are on this album. Carnival of Souls sounds nothing like Kiss, but you rate it higher. Very interesting. But anyways, this was a hell of a journey, and I enjoyed every episode. Rock on.
Awesome. That's where we beg to differ. Like we talked about Monster and Sonic Boom, not really, doesn't really sound like Kiss a whole lot either, in my opinion. We kind of talked about that. It's, missing that sound. And, with Carnival, I felt like that was kind of the pinnacle of the Eric Singer, Bruce Kulick, era, following up from Revenge. They just, some great songwriting on there, some great drumming, all that stuff. It's great production. One of my favorite sounding albums. With Monster, yeah, some of the songs like Eat Your Heart Out, I've kind of taken a little bit more of a liking to that song since we've done the episode. I've tended to start listening to that song a bit more now. Sonic Boom, I'm an Animal, I like that song a little bit more now, especially once I saw that live version that's floating there on YouTube. Made the song just sound so much heavier, and Gene sang it more like the Demon Gene in that live version. It just immediately made me like that song a lot more. I totally forgot, but we were going to do our 25 songs.
I totally forgot too.
Yes, so I know I think we mentioned that on the last episode, so we do apologize. We promise we will get that. Maybe we'll just go ahead and slide it in for next week's episode, which will be kind of fun anyway, because next week will be Wicked Lester, so that'd be cool to, throw our top 25 Kiss songs on top of that. So we will make a point to do that next week, I promise. We do apologize again.
Yep, I even thought about that earlier today and forgot. So.
Once we already started recording and going with the show, it suddenly popped in my head. I was like, oh crap. I was like, I hope he didn't do it. And then I'm sitting here not ready for it.
Yes, I meant to, but yep, also forgot. We also got a big long comment from Rain in Adamstown. He did give us his full overall rankings for every single Kiss album on here. Just for interest's sake, he did give the following albums a 10 out of 10. Kiss, Dressed to Kill, Gene Simmons, The Elder, and Creatures of the Night.
I love this Gene and Elder album. Personally not 10s, but hey, I respect that.
Yeah, absolutely.
What did he rank Hot in the Shade by chance?
6.
Okay, not hateful.
Not bad, yeah. He did actually also give us his rankings for Monster in there, so that was cool. His number 1 was Freak. He also noted on Shout Mercy, which was his number 2, he says, every time I listen to the song, I think it would be perfect for the movie Austin Powers. Character and style.
I don't know if you know this, but Austin Powers is like my favorite movies ever. Like all 3 of them, I just absolutely love. Yes. Love the the humor in there. I remember when the second one hit the theaters, I probably went and saw it at least 4 to 6 times in the theater, and I don't know how many times I've watched them since.
Yes. That would be funny to hear that song in one of those. I wish.
Somebody's going to have to edit and do that. Pull a scene out and throw that song in.
Yes. Yes. Lorraine also says, thank you. It was fun to watch all the episodes. Monster, the production is horrible. Oh man, every song a different sound. A couple of good songs. Okay, I like it a little better than Psycho Circus. I'll give Monster a 4.5, but this cannot be the last Kiss album. If they can't write good new songs, they should take the best producer they can find, like Andy Sneap or Roy Z, and record Sword and Stone, Shocker, Back on the Streets, and other unreleased highlights for a final killer release in a perfect world with all the ex-band members.
I like that idea. Even if they were to do that, I just don't know if they would still pull it off to where it would still sound like it's done with justice. You know what I mean? I almost feel like the demos we have are the best we're going to get, and it's almost, again, it's that whole thing of almost feeling like I'd be afraid of them ruining something, or, it's just, it's that chance,
Right. Yeah, that would be cool if they were to, I saw a joke, I think it was on April Fool's Day, it was an album cover and a fake release for a brand new Kiss album called Legacy, and I really liked that. I thought that was a cool album title, and the fake album cover was kind of cool looking. And yeah, that is kind of a neat idea. The thought of them getting everybody that's been in Kiss that's still alive, essentially, to just go in and do something. And we all know they won't, but that would be really cool.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, it's an unfortunate thing. I mean, it's one thing. Because it would be much easier to bring all those people up on stage to do one song. Yeah. But we all know that that's not even going to happen. So, yeah, it's just one of them things, unfortunately.
For sure. So jumping up to our wrap-up and awards show, we did have one new comment on that from Jay Rucker. He said he's given us his dad's full album list, so we did get that added in there as well. His top 3 albums were Creatures of the Night, Dressed to Kill, and Alive.
Very good.
Yes. Very fitting top 3. And then up to our last week's episode, the Indie Kiss Expo recap, possibly my favorite comment ever. Did you see this one? Did you read it?
Chuck McFarlane?
Yeah. Yes. Does anyone know if Grumpy Cat was any relation to Peter Criss?
That is gold.
That really is.
Did not think of that.
Yes, I think he was. He must have been.
Insert picture of Grumpy Cat and the Peter makeup here.
Yes. All right, so that's it for the comments. You ready to get into some album info?
Let's do it. And for some reason, my torrent program just randomly opened up for no reason. Okay. All right, let's get into it because this is one, again, a lot of people listening may not have a clue about this album and even know that it existed. So,
Yes, this is going to be a lot different, the album info section here, than the Kiss album, since it's going to be a lot of extra people, you know what I mean, extra different bands and things.
mm-hmm.
So, of course, Chelsea was an early 1970s band from New York City. Pretty much the only reason they're still known is because their drummer was Peter Criss. This was before he joined Kiss. Interestingly, he is credited on the album as Peter Criss, but with one S at the end of his name, not two.
Mm-hmm.
So that's strange. They did release just this one album, the self-titled Chelsea, in 1971. They started recording the second one, but then collapsed during the recording. Nice. Yes. Also, very interestingly, there's a few interesting things about this. First of all, this is our introduction to Stan Penridge, which is a name a lot of you Kiss fans ought to recognize. Although he is not on this album that we're reviewing today, he did join later. Although after the band collapsed during the recording of their second album, Peter and then the bass player Michael Benvanga, I hope I'm saying that right, and then Stan Penridge ended up forming Lips, another hopefully familiar thing. And, yeah, another interesting thing that I read regarding this whole thing. Written about Becky calling Chelsea band practices or Lips band practices and asking Michael, "Hey, when are you going to be home?"
And then, of course, we all heard the story, whether it's true, that I think Gene takes the credit that he insisted that they change it to Beth because they didn't want to create a confusion to make people think he was singing about Jeff Beck.
Right. Yes. So apparently this is also missing an official release date. According to Wikipedia, the album was released some point in early 1971, was recorded sometime in early 1970. This album was produced by Louis Merenstein, who had also a lot of interesting producing credits from back in the day. I looked some of that up and then lost it.
Mm.
Oh, he produced a bunch of Van Morrison albums, including the hit album Astral Weeks.
Oh, nice.
Yes, so that didn't expect to have sort of a fancy producer name there. This was Peter Shepley on lead vocals, Mike Brand on the guitar, Chris Aridis on the guitar, Michael Benvanga on the bass and background vocals, Peter Criss on the drums, John Cale played viola on tracks 7 and 10, and Steve Loeb played piano on track 8.
And not to mention, this wasn't really, it wasn't some kind of an underground label or anything that it got quietly released on. This was on Decca Records, which was a pretty big record label back then. I mean, most notably probably The Who, pretty much all their albums were on Decca.
Yeah.
As long as, there was a lot of other great stuff that came out on Decca label. So, I mean, it was definitely a well-known label that it came out on, so kind of surprising, but hey, it was cool.
Absolutely, yeah. I did also happen to notice here that Peter only has one writing credit on this album, and it's on Polly Vaughn. All the rest were the vocalist and Mike Brand, the guitarist, who I assume was the acoustic guitarist. Not sure there, but we did get a few other votes for this album as well. Of course, we have Jay Rucker put in his votes like 3 weeks ago. For this, his number one was the song "Hard Rock Music." He did give this album a 2.5 out of 10, so not a strong vote of confidence for Peter there. We also do have Steve and Rochelle McGowan's picks. Rochelle's number 1 was Long River. She also gave this album a 2 out of 10. Steve, however, gave this album a 4 out of 10. He notes, very interesting album. First time listening to it, last time as well. I tried to keep an open mind considering the time and era of the album. Heard influences ranging from the Stones, the Doors, and the Byrds. Nothing much more to say about it, but being a Kiss fan, if I ever stumbled across the LP, I would buy it just for the sake of Peter or Chris playing on it. His number 1 was Let's Call It a Day.
Yeah, it's, surely you listened to it again, though, since you had that extra time, as we mentioned. It's definitely, I agree with what you said with the influences. It's, definitely got that folky, almost, hippie at the time. But, that's the sound of the times, man. So, overall, I don't think it's too bad. It's got that good, there's hints of a tiny bit of that hard rock stuff in there, but mostly like kind of that folk. And honestly, in a lot of ways, what you guys might come to find out next week, it's almost similar to the Wicked Lester stuff at times, in a way. Because again, that was just the thing going on at the time.
Right.
And, I really wish Lips had done an album. Because with Beck, and then come to find out they did the original versions of a lot of the stuff that ended up on Peter's 78 solo album.
Right.
Which that stuff is floating around out there. So, man, it would have been cool if Lips had been able to do a release, but glad we at least have something like this.
Right. Yeah. A nice, interesting pre-Kiss Peter Criss thing.
Yes.
Yeah. So, my dad says this time, I think he's probably just going to put in votes for the albums he's more familiar with. So, didn't end up doing this one. He said, looking at the list, probably the first one he's going to go for is Peter's Out of Control album.
Cool. Yeah, again, I'm definitely looking forward to when we get to those Peter albums and revisiting Out of Control and then listening to all the other ones basically for the first time. I've never, sat and listened to them all the way before, so definitely
Right.
It's going to be a lot of new stuff for us as well, so,
Yes.
by no means are we experts on all this stuff.
No. This is going to, essentially force me to sit down and listen to stuff I've always wanted to, but just never let it be important enough to make time for,
Right, absolutely. Alright, so we will get into the album here. So 10 songs, and starting off with track 1, we have the song Rollin' Along. So, for the track opener, what was your first impression of it?
Interesting. It was an introduction because stylistically I wasn't sure what to expect. I was expecting something maybe a little close to the Peter's 78 solo album, but less sophisticated.
Mm-hmm.
It was completely wrong, completely and absolutely wrong. So it was a bit of a shock. The first thing that struck me was that weird drum beat.
Yeah.
Beginning, classic Peter, essentially. The song has kind of the same groove as 100,000 Years, which was nice. Peter doing his that thing, and then in the middle, suddenly it goes to a straight beat, which was neat. I found a lot of times throughout this album that everything was more sophisticated than I was expecting.
Mm-hmm.
Time changes and feel changes that I would have thought were out of Peter's skill range, and clearly I was wrong. And it was nice to be wrong. In a way, it was a bit disappointing knowing that eventually he would become basically useless as a drummer, But, here in his very early years and what you could argue approaching his prime, I was struck by the drums in this. The only other note that I had for this was that I was not a fan of those high background vocals.
Right. I agree. Yeah,
However,
for being the album opener, it was kind of like, could have been better.
yeah, I did. However, having said all that, I did end up putting this at number 3.
And yeah, like you said, I mean, I guess only within 8-9 years time, his playing would diminish so much from this, and yeah, not to mention there is some impressive drumming on here from Peter.
Yeah,
By no means, in my opinion, is there anything that's very memorable or signature as a lot of the Kiss stuff,
right.
the intro to Strutter, all that kind of, those kind of things. But still, some good work, and it definitely shows his versatility. I mean,
Yeah,
he started off doing the jazz stuff, playing in those kind of bands, and then doing this kind of thing, and then of course we all know what the Kiss sound was, and his drum solos and everything. So yeah, I mean, he was definitely versatile drummer, and it's just a shame that it just kind of went downhill that quick. So
yeah.
so I didn't really take the liberty to really rank these per se. I just kind of took it as as the album went, and just kind of talking track by track. So I guess, I don't know, for the sake of the rankings and the show, I'll rank them as we go. So I would give this one, I'd rank this as number 6.
Right on.
Track 2, we have "Let's Call It a Day."
Yeah. Oh, early? That should have been the end, right?
And thankfully, we weren't thinking that by the time we listened to this track. It, good enough to make you want to keep listening. Again, nothing really stood out for me on this one. Kind of along the same lines for me. As far as overall with the album, it felt like it did go by kind of quick. Like it was another good, easy listen to sit and listen to the whole thing again. It wasn't too incredibly long ago that I had listened to this for the first time, because had just recently gotten it into the collection. But it was good to sit and revisit it right away. But yeah, Let's Call It a Day, just not not one that I really cared much for. So I'm gonna give this one I'll rank it at 8.
I did enjoy the sort of Western vibe at the beginning of this one. It was a neat change from Rolling Along, which is a bit more straightforward. I really wasn't expecting an orchestra. And, clearly this is the 70s, early 70s, so this was not a keyboard. This was an actual orchestra, which you wouldn't expect an underground, unknown band to get something that complicated,
Absolutely, yeah.
So it was a nice, unexpected sophistication there. This song I noted that it has a neat sort of spacey vibe to it. And then I noticed that a lot of the songs, actually most of the songs of this album, ended up having that same vibe, and I got really bored with it near the end. But at the time that it was introduced here, I was like, okay, cool. There's some interesting time and feel changes here. I noted that the bass player is just going nuts through the whole ending.
Yes.
He's just playing all sorts of stuff. Again, that ended up becoming a bit of an annoying trend throughout the album. Made the whole album end up feeling like some jams that just sort of ended where they ended.
Yeah.
But because these things were introduced here at the beginning of the album, and I was still kind of digging everything, I did end up rating the song as my number 2.
Okay. Yeah, total jam band feeling with a lot of this stuff. And moving on to track number 3, we have "Silver Lining," and kind of already bursting the bubble here, but this was my number 1.
Nice.
I really enjoyed the vocals in this, the harmonies. Again, the time frame. I mean, the lyrics. Just reek of like the psych type stuff. You got um, mermaids sighing as they dance on the rocks with their strange men. Oh my God, I can't remember when. Just those kind of weird, off the wall type lyrics. It's just really cool. And when you look at the lyrics, it's they all hardly have any words, but
Right.
but yet it speaks volumes, especially on this song to me. And this one definitely had, I guess, sort of the most different sound to me. And again, just the vocal harmonies and the whole flow of the song, I definitely liked it the most.
Nice. Yes, I listed cowbell. That's my first note. Yeah, it was a very like feel good Beatlesy vibe at the beginning of the song, and I got that a lot throughout the album. That sort of late Beatles, White Album esque vibe that they were going for. And the only thing that kind of bothered me about it was that it feels like the song is building up to something that it never quite gets to. And so it got a little bit boring. When it ended, I was like, oh, all right.
Yeah.
But still, just for that beginning and the Beatlesy vibe, I did put this as my number 4.
Okay. Next up, we have All American Boy, not to be confused with All American Man that we'll
Right.
get later on. This one I ranked at number 5, and again, kings and queens like green, but fools fill the garden. Heavenly Hannah loves everyone. What does that mean? I don't know.
What is going on here?
That's an all-American boy. That's what it is. I don't know. So that's really all I had for that one.
Yeah. Based on this title, I was expecting something a little more upbeat. I was disappointed when the song started kind of slow.
Mm-hmm.
I was expecting, something a little bit more, I don't know, reality-based, which clearly was not this band's style. Didn't catch that until later on in the album, but especially after Silver Lining had that same sort of atmospheric vibe, and I was already starting to get kind of bored by the end of Silver Lining, so when All American Boy started almost the same way, like, yeah, getting a little bored. I also saw something that became a trend later on, which was not being able to hear the drums very well.
Mm.
And that bothered me. The only reason I'm here is for Peter.
Yeah.
And it got a little bit too atmospheric. Did not care for this song. A little bit of a letdown, so this one was my number 9.
Okay. Yeah, again, if you people listen to this, don't expect, the Kiss type of drumming and bombastic stuff from Peter, but, it is good stuff. Don't get us wrong. But definitely don't expect something more along the lines of, I don't know, the band or, that type of stuff that was going on.
For sure.
So last song on side 1, definitely a good way to end side 1 and kind of picking things back up. The track Hard Rock Music. And this was my number 2. And the one note I made on this was, for me, it was the first song and kind of the only song that I can really hear Peter's vocals standing out. Him doing those higher, Peter vocals like he's known for. And I really was having a hard time trying to, pick out his voice in all these other songs. And somebody, I think Steve, brought it up in maybe a text message that he thought Peter was doing lead vocals in one of these tracks, and I can't think what it is right now. But, after listening to the whole thing again, I don't recall any song that sounded like Peter was doing lead vocals, and you would almost think he would have been, but But again, hard rock music, good pickup, good way to end side one. Just your good straight up 70s, rock. And again, Peter's vocals standing out on top of that really brings your attention to focus when this song comes on after All American Boy kind of loses it a tad here and there.
Except for that high note that hits in the middle, the vocal high note. It's like the vocal thought he was Robert Plant and didn't quite make it. Yeah. Yeah, I was excited when this one came on. My first note is finally something a little more lively. It's a welcome change.
Mm-hmm.
And it was. I did kind of feel like the production quality took a bit of a dip, which wasn't horribly happy with. And then again, that bass player is just going nuts, and it's great. It's great. The whole thing. He's just he's the star of the show, essentially. What I was really missing in this one was a distortion guitar rhythm. Being that it's supposed to be hard rock music, the acoustic is a nice touch, and I don't think it shouldn't have been there, but it just wasn't enough to fill out the rhythm section behind the guitar solos for me. And then near the end, there was just a ton of like percussion overdubs or something that it felt like it just kind of got in the way of Peter's drummings. There was too much going on.
Yeah.
I was curious because there's no listing on Wikipedia of who did the percussion. I assume it would have been Peter.
True.
So I mean, at least there's that. But yeah, it didn't quite do it for me. But I was excited by the fact that things picked up a little bit. This one ended up being my number 6.
Okay. Opening up side 2, we have Ophelia. Again, not to be confused with the band or even Wicked Lester with Sweet Ophelia.
Right.
This was a good one. This one I ranked at number 3. And, it's just one of those good straight folky rock songs. I love the chorus, again with the vocals, just, everything just working great together. Not sure who this Ophelia they were singing about was, but if it was a real person, but apparently they had them in a tiffy, if you will.
This band wasn't a British band, right?
Maybe they pretended to be.
Yeah.
We're going to be the next Beatles.
I did enjoy the change in feel right when it starts, kind of like that jungle feel with all that extra percussion. And I did enjoy the percussion here. It didn't feel like too much, didn't feel like it got in the way. It's right where it ought to be.
Absolutely.
Although, I was trying to figure this out. Is there like a big water drop sound effect in the middle?
Yes, I caught that. I was like, what in the world was that?
I bet you I spent 2 minutes after that trying to make sure that wasn't some notification on my computer or something that had gone off.
Yeah. Because I was listening to the record, and when I heard that, I'm like, what? Like, it just kind of didn't even make sense. Yeah, like, all of a sudden you hear this boom. Not sure what that was supposed to be.
Yeah, but I did like how more instruments came in the song and filled it out a little. But similar to Silver Lining, I felt like the song was going somewhere, and it just never quite got there, and it ended before it.
Yeah. One of the, really the second shortest track on the album. So.
Right. So that one ended up being number 7 for me.
All right. Up next, we have Long River, which is the longest album on the track, coming in at over 7 minutes. So total 70s folk rock jam band typical type stuff there,
Right.
Was pretty common to get those long type of jam tracks back in the day. Yeah, this was a good one too. I totally see where Rochelle ranked it at number 1. It is a good song, but for me, it ended up coming in at number 4. And yeah, just a good, this would be the track although Silver Lining is my number one, I would think this would be the track I would recommend you sit down and put on. If you just want to get an idea what this album is about and the type of sound, I would excuse me, recommend sitting and putting on Long River. Just a really, really good song.
I should have gone first.
Okay.
I hated this song. Yeah, I didn't like this at all. My notes are not even sure what to say about this. The songs are all starting to run together at this point. Nothing horribly catchy. The weird ghostly sound effects are just annoying. Not sure what the deal is. And then my last note is, what is going on at the end? This is my dead last. This is number 10 for me.
So Luke's a huge jam band fan, as you can tell.
Yeah. It's especially after Ophelia. Again, just the sort of slow, atmospheric vibe was just getting old. I couldn't tell the difference. Didn't seem like set songs anymore.
Right. Speaking of least favorite, mine is the next track here, Grace. I don't know why, but I guess from the song title, I expected this to be the song that Peter would maybe have the lead vocals on. I was thinking, because again, I was thinking when Steve mentioned that, I was trying to really listen for it and could never catch it. But this song just didn't do it for me. I don't want to say any more about it.
Yeah.
I did not like it.
Yeah. I was glad for the change in feel again, just so that there was a clear difference from this song to the last one. And it sounded like Peter was using brushes, which is an interesting change from what we're used to with him.
Yeah, unless he was already hitting light at that point. They didn't have triggers then.
Yes.
No.
That one ended up being my middle of the road there, 5.
Instead of the end of the road like me.
Exactly.
Alright, so coming up next is Polly Vaughn, which on the album it states an asterisk here which says all songs by Mike Brand, Peter Shepley, except for Polly Vaughn, which is a traditional song. Arrangement by Chris Aridis, Peter Criss, Michael Benvenga, Mike Brand, Peter Shepley, and so I did not know that was a traditional song.
Nor did I.
I'm gonna have to look and try to find, hard telling how many versions are out there, but find a somewhat original version of it prior to when they would have done this. But not even knowing that when I listened to this, so not taking that into consideration. This one comes in at my number 7. And good stuff, man. You could definitely tell more of that Peter influence with this song, in my opinion. It was, I wish that his vocals stood out more, but I just was not hearing that. Maybe it had something to do with the mix, the way the vinyl came out. Maybe had I listened on a different version, maybe it was mixed differently. But just wasn't hearing it, and I was really wanting to. But for that matter, really good song. So good way to, almost close the album out here.
Right. The flute part near the beginning gave me an early James Bond vibe. I was as soon as it started, man, it seems like this should have been in one of the early James Bond movies. But speaking of the Peter influence, I noted that I was finally hearing the drums as loudly as I'd like to have heard them on the whole album.
Yeah.
It did get to the point that it felt a bit unfocused again in the middle. Felt like it was building towards something it didn't get to, and then as it was closing, it occurred to me, well, were there not words for the whole second half of the song? I don't think there were.
Yeah, true.
And so again, it lent itself to that idea of just a jam band who the song was over, but they wanted to play a little while longer, so they did.
Exactly. Pretty typical. And a lot of a lot of the repeated lyrics too, which was normal.
Right. Right. Yep. So this one ended up being my number 8.
Um, so the last track on the album here, which is the shortest track. It only comes in at 1 minute 44 seconds. Good Company. So of course this one ranks at number 9 for me to close it up. Um, short but sweet. It was kind of a cool little way to close it out. It sounds like you can almost picture a room full of them just kind of sitting around, in a circle, everybody kind of singing the song together, and kind of took me a little bit back to my childhood because I remember, my dad and mom and some of their good friends. They used to get together all the time and sit in circles like that, playing the acoustic singing songs. So it kind of took me back to that for some reason. Kind of picturing that type of image in my head when I heard this song. It was pretty cool. It kind of sounded like Peter at the end, like there was sort of random little talking there right at the end of it, and kind of to me sort of sounded a little bit like Peter, doing his little stuff. But good way to close the album. Perfect again, folky type song, and even though it ranked at 9, I did enjoy the track. It was a good way to close it out.
Yeah, I actually enjoyed this track a lot. This one surprised even me. I'll admit. But when I was cutting these tracks apart to listen to them, I caught a little bit of the end and heard those crowd noises and was a little bit disappointed because then I was like, oh man, they seemed like they were just goofing off. But then when I listened to the song and I realized, no, that actually makes perfect sense for that to be there. Exactly like what you were saying. The idea of the song was to be in a room with friends. I'm sure in their idea was, just getting a little tipsy and doing some stuff.
Not Peter.
No, no, no. And so I really enjoyed that it made sense in the context of the song. It was a fun way to end the album, and again, just the idea of it being potentially the most focused, least jammy. It felt like a song. This is a song, and this is how it was meant to sound. So yeah, for that reason, it ended up being my number 1. Not because I was glad the album was over.
Yeah, I mean, already looking back on it, I wish I had ranked it a little higher now, but I mean, again, that's just how much it changed from the listen to talking about it.
Right.
You know, some of the lyrics, Good Company makes me smile. I don't even know just why. I don't even know your name. Good Company, yeah, always about the same. I mean, there you go. So, what you were saying, so did you basically just find, what was this on YouTube, where someone just had the whole album as one huge track?
Yep.
And then you had to go through, okay. That makes it interesting. And then, so you found it on YouTube, split up the tracks yourself. I just threw on the record. So again, may have been different mixings there, or I'm not sure at all.
YouTube compression didn't do it any favors.
Right.
I did look it up on iTunes, the store, to see if I could actually purchase it, and it's not on there.
Mm.
But yeah.
I would like to know, any of our listeners or fathers of some of the listeners that chime in. Do you guys recall when this album came out? I mean, did it get much promotion? Did you go out and buy it when it came out? What was your first thoughts of it? If so, did it get any kind of radio play or anything like that? Or as far as I know, I haven't heard anything like that. Let alone if they ever played any shows as far as like a proper type of tour.
Right.
So please let us know if any of you guys, were around at the time that this came out, and um, any memories you may have of it. So I would love to hear those kind of stories about this album. And then, I can imagine if you had bought this album, being familiar with it, and then all of a sudden, a few years later, this band Kiss comes out, and you put the two together, like how much of a, kind of a shock value type of thing that would have been. Like, man, this is the same guy that was on this record here. Like, so,
Yeah.
So, overall ranking.
So this was really difficult for me because I was trying to balance, the time essentially, and then it ended up coming down to just what I personally like, which is probably what it should be based on for each of us anyway. I only did a 2 out of 10. The production, of course, it was pretty terrible, but for the time period, it makes sense that it wouldn't be amazing. This wasn't. They were a practically unknown band, and this was their debut album.
Right.
So I was expecting it to not be so good. I wasn't expecting for all of it to be so atmospheric and feeling directionless. Honestly, I think I was expecting something a little bit more like Peter's solo album, like I said earlier, or at least closer to it than this was. It was hard for the music to keep my attention because of how directionless it all felt. And as I said a bunch of times, it felt like a lot of the songs were building towards something and they never got there, and it got frustrating to listen to when that happened multiple times. Wasn't too sure I liked that the lead guitarist just sort of noodles over every part of every song. I don't know if you noticed that. It's like the guy knew what key they were playing in, but didn't know the chords well enough to just play the chords. And then the bass player too did that a lot too. He went a bit more wild than I personally would have liked, but it was, clearly both the lead guitarist and the bass guitarist were very good at their instruments. Unlike what you would get today, where it would just be like random notes wherever their fingers happen to land. But both of those things added to the unfocused feel of the whole album, made each song feel more like a jam session than a thought-out piece of music, which I personally don't enjoy so much. I did enjoy some of the Beatle-esque parts, though. Clearly they were an influence on some of the vocal harmonies, the chord choices. Steve had a list of bands that were clear influences. I'd add the Beatles and Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin, even, really, for the vocalist.
Absolutely.
To a lot of that, which was nice. Just wasn't quite enough to make the album feel like an undiscovered gem, which is what I was really hoping it was.
Yeah. I agree, though. I'm going to give it a 2 as well. Part of me was kind of hoping for like the bombastic type of drumming, that Peter's known for, and I was sort of wanting it to be a little somewhat heavier, like, the early Jefferson Airplane, or, some of the Hendrix type stuff, that along those kind of lines of, that heavy type of stuff that was out at the time. And also at the same time was kind of expecting more of the jazz type drumming that Peter was, so into and influenced by as well, especially, the Gene Krupa influence and people like that he grew up admiring. Didn't really get that out of the album as well. So it was kind of disappointing. But as far as the music, though, yeah, it is kind of what I expected for the time. Again, I tend to sort of compare it to the band more than anything, is what pops in my head mainly. That same type of stuff, the folky. It's not heavy. It's not really too soft either, but a good mixture right there. And whether they played concerts or not, I'm not sure, but I'm sure a lot of this stuff they probably would have had jam sessions on, and you could just tell it was bound to happen the way some of the songs played out. but yeah, for that matter, it's just it's worth listening to. Um, you know, especially being pre-Kiss.
Right.
It's always cool to hear where these guys came from. Um, you know, which is going to be coming up again next week and everything as well. And and I'm glad that Kiss never tried to make the type of claim that they did with Eric Carr, where they tried to pretend that Kiss was the first band they were ever in.
Yeah.
And that always griped me. When they do the unmasking on MTV, and oh, by the way, Kiss is the first band that Eric Carr has ever played in. It's like bull. We all know that now. So I'm glad they didn't try to play that off with Peter. He was. I mean, hey, he kind of had the success prior to Kiss, so and granted, it did good and bad because we know the stories of once they started Kiss, he tended to have the attitude of kind of knowing, the know-it-all and how the business works and that type of thing, and because he's the guy that had already been there and experienced it, so that it kind of hurt him at the same time, but it's again, I would definitely listen to it, and again, if you're one of those people that don't even like Kiss at all or are very casual, you may listen to this and like this type of stuff. And I'm going to say the same thing about Wicked Lester again next week, because it's a whole different cup of tea. It's not what you're probably expecting it to be. So, take it at that. Tea.
Yeah. All right, so we've got an important tie to break, unfortunately.
Jeez.
And I was gonna just do it based on our rankings, but we disagreed pretty equally on both of these. So it's between second and third place, and it's Rolling Along and Long River.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Long River was your least favorite.
Right.
Where did you rank Rolling Along?
3.
Hmm.
So it was 3 and 6, and then 10 and 4. I was hoping that both of us would have one or the other up or relatively far down.
Because then I know Rochelle ranked Long River 1.
Right. Yeah. It's still debatable. I was going to say that Long River seems to have more upper votes, but I mean, honestly, Rolling Along does too, because Steve and Jay both rated Rolling Along fairly high too. But nobody gave it their number 1.
So it sounds like Rolling Along probably has more high votes overall than what Long River does. So
yeah. I mean, you can make a fair argument either way, because I'm the only one who voted Long River so far down, but then both you and Rochelle voted Rolling Along, fairly far down.
I mean, if it seems like if Rolling Along outweighs the number of higher votes, then I would think it would have to go to that.
Right on. All right, you ready for some rankings?
Let's do it.
Okay, so we did end up with one other tie as well. It wasn't important, so we've gotten that figured out here. Yeah, starting off the new series with 2 ties on the first episode. That's the way to go. So in our number 9, which for this episode is our dead last place, we've got Grace. Not so graceful now, huh? In the number 8 spot, Good Company. Wasn't good enough.
It's my fault.
Yeah. The number 7 spot, Ophelia, who apparently just isn't as good as Sweet Ophelia. That's not as good. So our number 6 spot, Polly Vaughn. In the number 5 spot, All American Boy. Tied for 4th place, Hard Rock Music and Silver Lining. And our top 3 for the Chelsea album. In the 3rd spot, Long River. In 2nd place, rolling along. And in first place, let's call it a day.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, I didn't see that coming. And they were all very close. I was really worried as I was scoring this all up that we were going to have way more ties than we did. Everything was real close in score.
I was really not expecting a tie, especially right off the bat. So I can
Yeah,
understand things like Wicked Lester and Fraley and some of that stuff, but
we had some pretty differing votes between the what is it, 5 of us or maybe 6
mm-hmm.
that voted on it.
All right. So again, so that wraps up Chelsea. Um, Hope you guys enjoyed this first part of this whole new adventure. And coming up next week is Wicked Lester, which I'm gonna dare say maybe one of, if not the best albums of this whole list. I will say that now. Again, very interesting stuff. I love a lot of these songs. It's totally not what you're thinking, but it's good in its own way, I think. So get those votes in and reviews. And again, if anyone was around for the Chelsea release, I'd love to hear some stories of what it was like when that first came out. And of course, we're still thinking of a good title and whatnot for this part of the show. So please submit those if you have them, and we will definitely take them into consideration. And who knows, if this video has graphics, we already have a name. If not, we're still looking. So we may be pretty bare bones to start off. So that wraps it up. And for next week, for Wicked Lester, we'll see you then.